Hi, I'm John Maxwell. When the top companies in the world are looking for trainers, speakers, and coaches, there's one name that stands above the rest, and that's Maxwell Leadership. Our certified team members have gotten proven results for companies all over the globe, and our reputation, I'm proud to say, is second to none. Some of our members have risen to the top of their profession, including the one you're going to meet today. I proudly introduce you to my friend Bob Fabian Zinka.
Welcome to the Leadership and Success Podcast with your host, Coach BZ, where we help you lead with purpose and succeed with impact. If you're ready to grow into the kind of leader others want to follow, this podcast is for you. If you're determined to elevate your success and leave a lasting legacy, this podcast is for you. As my mentor, Dr. John C. Maxwell reminds us, everything rises and falls on leadership. Our goal is simple: to inspire you, challenge you, and equip you with insights that can transform the trajectory of your leadership journey. Welcome aboard to another episode of the Leadership and Success Podcast with Coach BZ.
My name is Hugh Molotsi. We've written a book about innovation and enterprise, specifically about building a culture of innovation. One of the things that we've learned is that in most companies, the biggest underutilized asset are the ideas in their employees' heads. And that what innovative companies have learned is to make use of that asset, you have to empower your employees to work on their own ideas. And so we've written a book about how you can build a culture of innovation where you have these empowered employees who are driving growth.
I'm Jeff Zayas. We wrote this book for anybody who really cares about driving more innovation in the company they work at. In the book, we tell the story of Patty Porter. The story of Patty is based on our own experiences and lessons we've learned from other innovation leaders. We begin the story with Patty starting to feel restless in her job. As her company had grown, it had also become more bureaucratic. The job felt less engaging. Patty's manager asked her to lead an effort to design a program to counter the bureaucracy to give employees more autonomy. Patty and a team of volunteers proposed whitespace time to give employees 20% time to work on their own projects. After some initial management pushback, the team introduced the program and organized hack days. The quarterly hack days allowed employees to collaborate and showcase their projects. After achieving early success, Patty and her volunteers went back to their day jobs, but then whitespace time stalled. Patty was subsequently asked to become a full-time innovation leader and lead a team to reignite the program. Patty's innovation team deployed design thinking throughout the company, so all employees were equipped with the skills to innovate. Patty's team then brought in customers to collaborate with employees during hack days and encouraged employees to form teams across organizational boundaries. Instead of having senior leaders pick their favorite ideas, Patty got employees to run experiments with real customers so that ideas would have the chance to prove themselves. Patty worked with different functional groups so that employees didn't run into roadblocks when attempting to run their experiments. Through Patty's effort, her company developed a culture of innovation where employees got to do the best work of their lives and drive renewed growth. This was Patty's proudest accomplishment.
Every company in the world should have a culture of innovation. And we've done a lot of hard work to pull together our stories and the stories of other innovation leaders to create a book that'll give you the tools and the lessons you need to be successful in driving a culture of innovation in your company.
All right, welcome to another edition of the Leadership and Success Podcast. I have a great guest waiting in the green room. And for those who watch the show right before this one, for a moment of gratitude, it's a time we take every single time that we meet, and we just want to be grateful. And earlier today, I was really grateful for freedom. And also for really standing on the shoulders of giants, like the general I just spoke to on the previous episode, right? People who really go above and beyond in order to make things happen and really care about the people who would follow after them. And just a reminder that for this week, our friend in the spotlight is Admiral Mike Studman. And I have an article about him everybody can read. And tomorrow I will also have a live podcast with Coach Kimberly Cohn. She's going to be the instant bestseller of a book, Stepping into Greatness, which she just published last week. So we're going to be talking about leadership, faith, and the courage to begin. And like me, she's a Maxwell Leadership Certified Coach, and that's going to be for tomorrow. And for later today, for our Black History Year, which we publish an article almost every day, I'm going to be publishing later today an article about General Daniel Chapis James Jr. He's the very first African-American 4-star general. And that's going to be the article coming out later today. All right, so let me see if I can quickly introduce our phenomenal guest today. I am really honored and privileged to be sitting down and speaking to an extraordinary innovation leader, an author, a board director, and a technology executive to the Leadership and Success podcast. My guest is Hugh Molotsi. He has spent more than 3 decades helping organizations transform bold ideas into lasting innovation. He's a former president and CTO of BuyNothing, engineering fellow and vice president of innovation at Intuit, and accomplished board director, entrepreneur, and leadership advocate. Hugh has dedicated his career to empowering people to think differently, solve meaningful problems, and create cultures where innovation thrives. He currently serves on corporate boards, advises emerging companies, and is the co-author of the outstanding book, The Intrapreneur Journey. And I showed you just a short clip about that. We're going to be talking about it, right? Empowering employees to drive growth. A practical roadmap for helping employees become innovator from within their organization. So they are intrapreneur within the organization. So his passion for leadership extends beyond business though. For its Blacktown initiative, we're going to be talking about that, blacktowns.org, but also preserving the remarkable history of historically Black community and the entrepreneurs who built them. Whether you are a military leader, a cybersecurity professional, or engineer, or an entrepreneur, or executive, or aspiring people leader, you will not want to miss this conversation. Part of what we're going to be talking about today is why the future belongs to intrapreneur, not just the entrepreneur, which everybody knows, but also its best leadership advice for the next generation of innovator. So without any further ado, please help me welcome to the Leadership and Success Podcast, the one and only Hugh Molotsi. All right. Good morning, Hugh. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. Thank you for having me on.
What a great honor and privilege to be talking to you this morning. Is there something that you are grateful for today? I'd like to start with a moment of gratitude.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. No, I'm just thankful for my health and my family. You know, July was a little bit of a bumpy month on a couple of dimensions, but you know, it's August and we are all healthy, and so I'm grateful for that.
That's so wonderful. Now, is there something about you that most people may not know when they first meet you, either a superpower or just a unique skill that people may not know?
Well, you know, that's that's a good question to ask me. You know, I think you know, obviously I grew up in Africa, in Zambia, but maybe people may not know. I have an interesting story. My parents actually from South Africa. They were exiles during apartheid, and so they had moved to what was then Northern Rhodesia, and that's where, you know, they brought up their family. And so people may not know I have this interesting connection with multiple countries in Southern Africa. I like to think that you know, it gives me a different perspective because you know, I've had to integrate myself into different communities in the course of my life.
Wow, that is awesome. And we have some people who are going to be watching us live on YouTube and LinkedIn and ask us some questions. I've also invited some of the co-authors of your work, so hopefully they are gonna say hi when they show up. But I've really been looking forward to this conversation because your career perfectly blends engineering, innovation, executive leadership, entrepreneurship, board governance, and now preserving history through Blacktown. That's just incredible. So when people hear your resume, you know, Intuit Fellow, Vice President of Innovation, President and CTO, Board Director, on and on and on, best-selling author, they often assume it was all carefully planned. Looking back, what surprised you most about your own leadership journey?
Yeah, no, it was definitely not carefully planned. I think there was a lot of luck, a lot of serendipity. But I would say that one of the things I'm very grateful for, along the way, there were many people who saw potential in me that I did not see in myself. And they
Mm,
took time out to pull me aside and point to me and say, look, here are some things that you should consider doing. And,
yes.
I'm very grateful for those folks because I don't, I certainly would not have the journey, the career I've had without their intervention.
That is so true because whatever we have accomplished, the truth is we haven't done that alone. It's wow, powerful. And who are some of the people, maybe mentors or people you followed, thought leaders who have influenced your leadership style the most?
Yeah, there are so many, and I feel bad that I cannot mention all of them, but I'll mention a couple.
Just mhm.
Uh, I spent most of my career at Intuit. I was there for 22 years, and
Wow,
and one of my heroes is Scott Cook. He's the founder of Intuit. He obviously has been brilliant and is a brilliant man. He's been very successful. But what's most amazing to me about him is that he remains to this day very humble and very
wow,
curious. When he's meeting interns, for example, his mindset is, what can I learn from these interns? So
wow.
I've seen, in the course of my life, how success tends to change some people.
Hmm.
There's this saying that power is corrupting. Absolute power is absolutely corrupting. I think
Yes.
there's probably should be a similar saying for success, because sometimes you'll see success morph people in grotesque ways. But Scott
Mm,
is somebody who has somehow managed to be immune from all of that, and is
wow,
continues to be an amazing person, even with all his success.
that's
The
amazing.
other person I want to mention is somebody who is mentoring me to this day. His name is Barry Lawson Williams. He's one of the Bay Area OGs, an early Silicon Valley Black executive, and he's sat on many important boards. And he's been very generous mentor with his time. But
Wow.
for me, he's a role model in how he has invested in the next generation, how he wants to make sure he's leaving doors open for others.
He is definitely a legend in Silicon Valley. Is there a specific lesson that you've learned from him that you believe will remain with you for the rest of your life?
Well, I mean, one of the things, for example, is that he actually makes time to mentor younger people. He will have
Yes.
people regularly over at his home. He will host dinners. So it's not just something he does once in a while. It's
Yes.
actually something that he has set aside time and made a priority.
Mm.
I think again that kind of dedication is very inspiring.
Now, I must say, we both live in Silicon Valley now. And prior to Silicon Valley, for example, I was working for the University of Alabama 15 years. I've been in the Navy for almost 22 years now, about to retire. But in Silicon Valley, first thing I noticed when I came here, people change jobs like every 2 to 3 years. It's like if you don't change job, they think something is wrong with you. Now, you've been at Intuit for 22 years. That is amazing. Wow. Very, very few people remain somewhere that long while continually reinventing themselves. So a question I have for you is, how did you avoid becoming comfortable at Intuit?
Yeah, well, first off, I must say, my time at Intuit was a blessing.
Yes.
I realized not everybody would have that opportunity. I enjoyed the company when it was fairly small,
Hmm.
uh, and I got to watch it grow from about 500 people to over 10,000 in the time I was there.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
that's not everybody's going to have that type of opportunity. But one of the things about a company that's growing is that there are always lots of opportunities, and Intuit kept challenging me. There were always
Mm,
new challenges, new problems to solve. So there wasn't really time to be complacent and just comfortable. We were always
that's
looking
amazing.
for a problem to solve.
Wow. I know it's a great company because one company is work for our head of HR. You guys stole her, but she said she's just having a fabulous time over there. But how did you keep thinking like a startup founder inside a fortune company?
Yeah, again, as I was saying, there are always new problems to solve. You build a product successful, but inevitably there are always shortcomings. There's always things that customers struggling with. We have customer support. We'll get calls and we'll learn about where people are struggling. And then there are problems that we haven't tackled yet that we know customers need to solve. And so if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, your mind is always working on, okay, how do we solve these problems? And just the nature of the beast is there are always problems to solve.
This is really amazing. This is Silicon Valley. It's kind of like Hollywood, right? Pretty much, no, the Golden State, California in general. People come here with dreams and they want to make it. And everybody has an idea of $1 billion app or business or something. But you've actually done it. You've helped launch products that become $1 billion businesses. What separates ideas that scale like yours from ideas that really never leave the whiteboard?
Well, look, what I always tell people, ideas themselves are a dime a dozen. So
Yes.
if you come up with what you think is a great idea, don't think you've hit the jackpot. Execution is everything. Turning that idea into something that actually is tangible and
Say
actually
that
works.
again.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
that ultimately is where the value is. And it turns out it's obviously it's not as easy as it seems to turn even what you think is a great idea into a great product. And even though I'm very proud of the success I had at Intuit, I helped launch many products at Intuit. Most of them didn't actually pan out in market. And so you also have to keep in mind that it's like baseball. If somebody baseball has a 300 hitting average, we say, oh, they're really great. Well, doesn't
Yes.
that means that 7 out of 10 times they
Yes.
don't make it to first base, right? So, but innovation is like that. There are lots of you want to have lots of at bats, a lot of attempts to build things, and understand again, it's about the execution is what will get you to success.
Wow, that is really, really insightful. Now, I know you don't brag a lot about yourself, but you have received Intuit very first Founders Innovation Award. That means something. Which accomplishment made you most proud? Not just because it generated revenue and money and all of that, but because it really changed how people worked.
Yeah, when I look back at my time at Intuit, I think I'm proudest of the work we did on the culture. Obviously, I spent a lot of time on the innovation culture because, when we became a big company, we had to become very intentional about how do we not lose our entrepreneurial edge. And,
Yes.
of course, a lot of what we talk about in the book, The Entrepreneur's Journey. But also, one of the things I'm very proud of, I spent some time working with our rotational development program, which is something that I felt Intuit was one of their hidden gem secrets, is we would hire new grads out of college, out of any discipline. We would put them through a two-year rotational program where they would work on
Wow.
on different functions 6 months at a time. And out of that, they would essentially, think of it as Intuit's MBA program. Out of that, they would be well-rounded business leaders. And when I think of that program, over the last 20 years, I see so many former RDP associates,
Wow.
now CEOs, executives,
That's amazing.
leading funds, doing just amazing things. And so, I think probably for all of us, when we look back on our lives, it's really the impact that we've had on people that is the thing that is most meaningful.
That is really amazing. I know that's one thing the military does pretty well too. When you're a junior officer, they just keep changing jobs like every 2 to 3 years, so you can get a large, broad experience on everything that we do. This way, one day, like I had the chance of you become a commanding officer, you have a pretty good idea how everything works and fits together, and how your mission actually plays into the bigger mission of the country. That's just so powerful. Now, at Intuit, you eventually became vice president of innovation. How is leading innovators different from leading engineers?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing, you have to remind people is you want to suppress your urge to judge ideas. Somebody comes with you and says, I have this idea. And, you might think to yourself, I don't know about this idea, that, it's not going to work because of this and that. But that's not your role. Your role is actually to push them to say, okay, if you're excited about this idea, go and validate it. And, we have all these techniques, the lean startup methodology, which teaches you ways in which you can quickly and efficiently test ideas. And that's what I push people to do. And especially when they are making assumptions, push them and say, I think you're making an assumption there. You should go into the market and test it out, and make sure that they're relentlessly customer focused. That's your role. Ultimately, because you should not be the judge, it should actually be customers deciding, with their wallets, with their what ideas are actually worthy.
And actually, when you talk about bias, so there is also this unconscious bias, right? And there are a few firms in Silicon Valley that tend to only hire certain kinds of people who have a specific background, maybe come from a specific school. In my opinion, that's a big mistake, because I do believe that diversity is really one of our greatest strengths in this country. Is there anything you would tell someone who's listening, maybe a new manager or even a senior executive leader, on why diversity might be one of those things that's going to help your team kind of get rid of that unconscious bias or blind spot when everybody thinks exactly the same way, and then they don't really check out their blind sides?
Yeah, it's such a great point you're making. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion, even though politically it may not be the fad right at this moment. But there's so much literature has been published on how teams are more successful, diverse teams are more innovative, diverse teams are more profitable. We can look at that up. But in general, what I would say to people is, I think what often happens is we look at ourselves as a template. It's like, look, I had a certain path, I overcame certain challenges, and I am. And so then you start to look at other people and see if they fit that template. And that's a mistake, because each of us will have unique journeys, which will bring different perspectives. And actually, the last thing you want when you're building a team is to have a bunch of people who are just mini yous or mini me's. People are just very similar to you, because that is actually the opposite of diversity. You now have a homogenous team, and you'll definitely have blind spots. Part of and I think about some of the big successes that I've experienced over my time in my career. A lot of it has come down to just the value of somebody's perspective that was different than mine.
Yes.
Being able to have that perspective reflect in what we're building, extremely valuable.
That's a really great insight, because I want to talk about psychological safety just a minute as a leader, because there are some leaders who don't like to hear anything contradictory to what they already think. And I think it's so important to, ultimately, you're the leader, you're going to make the final decision. But before you make that decision, to actually get input from your people, especially those who may have a completely different perspective than you. What do you think as leader, what we should do to ensure that we are humble enough to keep on listening, even when we get the big role, we become a vice president, a president, or a chief, whatever? Why is it important to build that culture where people can speak freely, especially when whatever they have to say is contradictory to where we think we are heading as an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you want people to speak up, because again, that's what's going to actually help you. It's going to protect you when you have blind spots, when there are things that you have not considered, and then somebody raises a point. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because it's now they're giving you more points of data that you have to consider. It's naturally, I would say, difficult. Especially if you're passionate about something, you're excited, you want to get going, and somebody now is voicing some issues, hesitations. It's natural that you might get irritated and you may not want to hear it. But I wrote a blog about something that I learned many years ago called decision-making modes. I reference that because it's a good way to help yourself break out of that behavior, that you might have unintentionally, which is just, if you're about to make a decision, you go through these modes. One of the modes is where you essentially consult.
Yes.
So what you do in your mind is to tell people, there's this decision I need to make. And what do you think? And you do it in such a way that your mind is open and you hear all the different points of view. The next mode is now where you want to get their advice. You say, okay, I'm thinking of doing X. Are there any objections? What do you think? And then that's your opportunity now to hear if there's any pushback or any other things they thought about. But finally, when you get to now your decision to inform, you're saying, okay, here's a decision I've made. And by the way, even if it goes against maybe what some people had advised, at least what you've done now is you're prepared to say, yes, I heard this concern, but I'm deciding to go this direction.
Mm-hmm.
You're now prepared with an answer, as opposed to just saying, no, we're just going to move ahead. I'm going to keep the blinders on. And also what I point out, which is really important, because with decisions, obviously you want to be steadfast, you want to move forward, you don't want to keep revisiting decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I also say, if new data comes to bear that you have not considered, then you should be open to reconsidering their decision. It is not it's not a weakness in that sense. It's actually a strength to say, no, I'm willing to reconsider because there's new data to consider.
Yes. Well, and I want everybody to also catch your blog, and I believe it's blog that Molotsi.com, right? And they may be able to read this article that you just mentioned, and I think that is so important. And as you were talking, another thing that came to mind is just humility. To me, humility is one of those characteristic traits that really makes the difference between an average, a good leader, and an outstanding one. Now, you mentioned Scott, right? He's the founder of Intuit. He became a Fortune 500 company, but even him being a CEO and having all of the knowledge experience he has, he still wants to learn from an intern, someone who just came out of school who has absolutely no experience, but he wants to learn from. That is humility, and it's really very rare to see, because the more successful you are, you have more money and influence and so forth. Now, like you say, sometimes power will corrupt some people, but I feel like humility is one thing that's going to prevent you from being corrupted. I guess the question I have from you, starting at the bottom to becoming vice president at the Fortune 500 company, what kept you humble? Why do you think you still have that idea that you're not the smartest person in the room? You can still learn from anybody, even a brand new intern. Why are you so humble, you think?
Well, I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I would say my colleagues kept me humble.
Yes.
My family keeps me humble. I mean, this is one thing when you're working with such great colleagues who are really smart. They will not be shy about correcting you and telling you when you're wrong, and that's a blessing. I also think one of the things that I really value from my time at Intuit, there was all the leadership training. We would do things that some people may feel is touchy-feely, like learning about emotional intelligence. For me, those lessons are so powerful, because what it teaches you is to be much more introspective, much more self-aware. And the more you understand about yourself, the more you understand, yes, I have strengths, I have superpowers, but I also have weaknesses. I think that awareness keeps you humble. It also makes you very appreciative of other folks, because you're going to meet people who have superpowers that you don't have. And that also is, again, very grounding. And realizing that, look, we all need each other. So, and again, the other thing I'll also say just about humility, as I said in the beginning, I've been very fortunate. I've been very lucky. I think along the way, people have been very generous to me. So that's another thing, just reminding myself, I didn't get here by myself. I had lots of help along the way. And even to this day, people continue to help me.
That is really powerful. I want to talk about your leadership philosophy just a little bit. You said, one thing I really love when I was doing the research for the show is about your work. No, you argue that innovation isn't a department, it is leadership. And I don't think anything could be truer than that. What do you think are some of the biggest myths executives have about innovation in general?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one is that, innovation just comes from, you just need to hire a few geniuses who will come up with all the ideas, and then the rest of the company will implement them. I suppose that could work on a case-by-case basis. But what I've seen in terms of companies that have sustained innovation, they come up with great products again and again, is that they have a culture of innovation. And in a culture of innovation, it's not a few geniuses who are driving innovation. It's really is drawn from everybody in the company. I mentioned in the book, we have this notion of this divide between where decisions are made and where insights are actually experienced. If you're a frontline worker, somebody who works on product or services customers, you are bombarded with insights every day. But in many companies, nobody's asking you, hey, what should we do to improve the product or improve how we service customers? A lot of those being made in in conference rooms with executives who don't spend as much time with customers. And so that's the inside decision divide that we talk about. So in an innovation, in a good culture of innovation, you actually empower employees to make those decisions, to contribute the ideas, and that's what leads to this sustained innovation.
That is really powerful. As you know, Spain won the World Cup this year, and people didn't really expect them to because they didn't have any superstar, right? But it was really system over superstars. Really, the leadership lesson I got out of that. Our Spain's World Cup masterclass really found modern team leadership, right? Great leaders don't create superstar, but they do create system where anybody can become a superstar. I feel like that's really the culture you had at Intuit, and I think that's really a lesson many of us need to learn, hopefully once. But another question I have for you is why do so many organizations hire creative people, but then they unintentionally build the systems that suppress creativity? I think Steve Jobs, which is a giant and icon, a legend in Silicon Valley, used to say, "What do you hire the smartest people, and then you tell them what to do. If you hire them, you need to let them be smart and do what you hire them to do." But anyway, why do you think that is?
Yeah, look, we talk about this innovation paradox. It's a real thing. So when you are just a small company, maybe working inside a garage, obviously you're very entrepreneurial, you're moving fast, you're solving problems. But once you get to success and you start to scale, you start to build a company, and the company needs structure, it needs bureaucracy, it needs process. And those things, unfortunately, are way against innovation, because now decisions have to be made through a decision-making chain. Now people have rules that need to be followed, on and on and on. And also, what happens when you have a bureaucracy tends to want to protect the status quo. Bureaucracy tends to be anti-change. And if you think about what innovation is at its core, it's change. So it's not because people are bad, it's just the nature of the beast that you've scaled, and this is what you've created. And so to still be innovative as you scale and grow as a company requires intentionality. You have to say, in spite of all of these things, how do we still allow a culture where people can be innovative? And yes, I love that Steve Jobs quote, which is, you have to now think about, how do we make sure people have ideas, they can contribute to those ideas, and they're empowered to work on those ideas, even inside this large bureaucracy.
Now, which takes me to my next question. What's the difference between an employee and an intrapreneur? Which then is going to lead? We're going to spend a section on your best-selling book, which I think everybody needs to get. It's available everywhere. The Intrapreneur's Journey, Empowering Employees to Drive Growth. I think that is so critical. So how does a listener who is an employee start thinking as an intrapreneur?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, entrepreneurs are employees, right? But what distinguishes them? Well, it really just comes down to being willing to take the initiative. Again, a lot of people who are working in a corporate job right now often are just sitting at their desk or at their cube waiting for somebody to give them instructions on what to do next. Somebody's entrepreneur is saying, we'll see a problem, and will not just sit and complain about it. They will say, okay, how do we fix this? And then they're also willing to challenge the status quo. And this, by the way, may be the hardest part, because sometimes what you might have in your mind, like, hey, let's make this change, not everybody's going to be excited about. In fact, you may even have some people say, no, absolutely do not do that. But again, who's an entrepreneur is willing to say, I'm going to hold my ground. I think this is really important. We should do this. And again, their mindset is relentless about making things better, even in the face of strong pushback.
That is really powerful. I believe I am right. It was at Google, but many companies do this where they have their employees acting as entrepreneur, where they try to solve problem they are having. Well, because Google, I believe, on every Friday, if I'm not mistaken, they give all of their employees at least 4 hours to work on their own project. And many times this project end up becoming huge billion-dollar product for the company, which is just amazing, right? But when you are a small startup in Silicon Valley, you're like, oh, no, I want all of my employees to just be working on those tasks. But then when you keep working, you don't have any white space to think or innovate, then, you don't really get to have ideas out of the box. like that may become extremely profitable for the organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Google. I mean, many people don't know that Gmail actually, so Google has something called 20% time, which
Mhm.
essentially empowers employees. That's your time every week that you can work on your own ideas. And
Wow.
Gmail actually came out of 20% time. So,
Amazing.
those are, there are lots and lots of stories we document in the book about how many successful products actually came from employees working on their own ideas. And
Amazing.
something I'll also say, what is really interesting about you talk about ideas being worth a dime a dozen. You know, something that is may sound like a contradiction, but is the best ideas tend to be the worst sounding ideas, right?
Mm.
Best ideas tend to be the worst sounding ideas. So why is that? Well, because the best ideas are the ones that are disruptive. They're very different.
Yes.
The world is going in a particular direction, and somebody's proposing, hey, let's do something that is just dramatically different. So just
Yes.
on its surface, it's just going to sound absolutely terrible. And so if you have a lot of structure around how ideas are vetted in your company, and
Mm.
leadership has to decide on which ones are good and which ones are bad just based
Yes.
on sound, you will filter out the good ideas. Think about something
Wow.
like Uber. If you're old enough to remember the days before Uber, if somebody had said to you, hey, I've got this idea, people driving their own cars will come and
Yeah.
give you a ride. I mean,
Yeah.
it just sounded ludicrous on the face of it, and yet we can't imagine life without it today. That's the nature of these best ideas. Again, they tend to.
Mm. No, that is really powerful, because you just reminded me, General C.Q. Brown, the former chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. He actually had a post which spoke to me a lot. I'm trying to see if I can find that, but it was talking about 5 levels of no's. I think was the gist of it, because people tend to just say no to any ideas that come just
Yeah.
because they have a bias against it. But it's like, no, wait. Maybe you don't wanna say no. You need to think about it. But anyway, it gives you five levels to process, then to decide no, if this is really a no. Okay, I just found it. It says the 5 stages of no. Number 1, hell no. Number 2, no. But number 3 is we will think about it. No, don't just say no yet. Just think about it.
Yeah.
And then number 4, not a bad idea. And then number 5, we should be doing it already. So if you just give yourself permission, to think about a brand new idea that sounds like you say, completely disruptive, completely out of the box, maybe there is a gem in there that's actually going to be helping your team and your organization. So just don't just say no out of the box. So let me ask you this: based on all of your great experience, let's say you become CEO of a Fortune 500 company tomorrow. What would be the first 3 cultural changes you'd make, or at least a couple? What would be your priority in order to make the organization more innovative?
Yeah, well, first I must acknowledge my bias. Obviously, I talk a lot about innovation culture. Clearly, I believe it, and
Yes.
I think for a lot of companies, as I was saying earlier, their biggest underutilized asset is the ideas in their employees' heads. And to me,
Yes.
that's the first big thing to change. How can we start to empower those employees to contribute their ideas? So I think for most companies, that's something that would jump to mind. I think for the rest of it, of course, it would depend on the company and what's going on there.
Mhm.
But in general, the way I approach leadership is really, how do you make sure that people are coming to work
Yes.
passionate about what the company is doing, bringing their
Mm.
best work right every day, that they're
Yes.
not just checking in and checking out. And I think ultimately that speaks to the culture of the company that you're building. It also speaks
Mm.
to the mission of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
It really can't just be about let's go make money. It really needs to be about let's make this positive impact in the world that all of us can get behind. So I think
Mm.
those are things that for me are really important, that feel foundational. Without them, it
Yes.
feels very hard. Then how do you navigate what are more and more choppy waters, if we think about this economic environment,
Mhm.
without that foundation.
That is really powerful because I know, I had the great chance of becoming a commanding officer in the Navy. And one of the things I was talking with my mentors is uh, he told me as a skipper, really two things are extremely important. One, you need to create an environment where people want to come to work. In America, people like to say, thank God it's Friday. No, no, no. Thank God it's Monday. I want to go to work. I want to wake up early, excited because I want to be there. And then once they get there, they want to do the very best work they can, and that is just so powerful. So let's talk about your best selling book. I want to make sure we spend a segment on this. I believe everybody needs to purchase this book, The Intrapreneur's Journey: Empowering Employees to Drive Growth. I guess one of the first question I want to ask, but you kind of segue into it already, because perhaps the most underutilized asset in most companies are ideas in their employees' head. You just said that, and that seems to be the central statement, I think, for this book. And the framework kind of focuses on creating sustainable innovation system rather than relying on isolated innovation labs, right? So one of the first questions I want to ask is, why did this book have to be written? What inspired you to write The Intrapreneur's Journey?
Yes, when I was at Intuit, we would get a constant stream of visitors, requests from other companies who said, "Hey, we've heard about you guys are doing something interesting, innovation. We'd like to learn about it." And so
Wow.
we would host companies who would come to see us, and and explain everything that we do. And one of my colleagues at the time, Jeff Zayas, I said to him, we talk about this all the time. It's getting repetitive. We should write a book about this stuff. And really, that was the seed of the thought of putting a book together.
That's really powerful. Like we already said in the introduction, you've got decades of experience with innovation. Why was it important to you personally to capture all of those lessons learned before they were lost?
Yeah, so the book, the approach we had in the book was really to help somebody at any company who wants to get this notion of an innovation culture going, help them get it started, because a lot of what's required is to convince leadership, convince their colleagues that this is a good thing to do. And as it turns out, there are the pushback, the arguments you're going to get against it are very predictable. And so the book, what we try to do is prepare you to say, here's what you will do to counter them. The most compelling data you can use is just essentially the stories of other companies where innovation culture has paid off. So we bring those stories to bear, whether it's from Intuit, from Google, from Atlassian, from 3M. There are lots and lots of companies that have had this experience, and so people can see that this works. It's not an experiment. It's not just a dream. But ultimately, again, this notion of doing the best work of your lives, for me, this is so important. You spend most of your work, your awake time as out at work. So, you want that time to be inspired time that you are enjoying, time you feel like you're making a positive contribution, not just, you're looking at the clock and you can't wait to check out. And for that to happen, you should feel empowered. You should feel like, yes, the company is actually benefiting from my strengths and I'm actually doing something meaningful. So the book is really, if we can make innovation cultures, if we can help catalyze that in other companies, I'm very happy.
That is really something, because when I read the book, you kind of divide the book is organized around practical component for an innovation culture. You talk about time and freedom, dedicated innovation team, design thinking, open collaboration, and so on. With time and freedom, why is time often the most overlooked innovation investment?
Yeah, look, that in many ways is maybe the most provocative part of what we propose, because imagine you're telling a manager who, has this priority list as a team, they wanted to hire more people, but there was no budget. And so they're already scratching their head. How are we going to get all these priorities done we've been signed up for? And then you come to that manager and say, oh, by the way, 20% of the time of the team should be given just for them to work on whatever they want. It just sounds ridiculous, right? And so, people understandably push back. But that is actually what we're saying, is that, look, if an employee's time is 100% allocated to assigned tasks, if they have a groundbreaking idea, it'll never come to fruition because they don't have time to work on it. And so you have to create that space, that white space, so that they can actually work on those ideas.
Wow. And what about freedom? What does freedom really mean? Because freedom without accountability can sometimes create chaos. How do leaders strike the right balance?
Yeah, so for me, freedom is about autonomy. So some of you may have read the book by Daniel Pink called Drive. And he says, he makes his point that people think the way to get people to work hard is just pay them more or give them rewards. And he said, actually, there have been so many experiments. You can read the book which dispel that myth. He said, actually, the way people get to work harder, he says the true roots of motivation are what he describes as mastery, purpose, and autonomy. So autonomy is one of the important aspects of how you get people to be very passionate and work hard in what they do. And autonomy just says, you choosing something versus somebody coming to you and saying, go and work on something. And believe it or not, it's not, it may sound like it's creating chaos, but it doesn't. Yes, there are guidelines you need to put around what we mean by freedom. This is not time. This is not time to goof off. But I always tell people, if it's, because sometimes people say, "Oh, tell me what your idea is. Run it by me first, and I'll approve it." I say, if that's how you've structured it, then it's not really freedom. But again, if you empower people to do to work on their own ideas, and again they're inspired, they're looking at what other employees are doing and the impact they're having, it actually becomes a force multiplier for innovation because they're going to be so passionate about the thing they're working on. I will also say, and we also make this point in the book, that you do want dedicated resources to make sure that this unstructured time is going to be used, productively and efficiently.
Yes. Well, now, one thing I think I've only noticed that in Silicon Valley, especially in the startup world, they tend to, we're talking about, dedicated innovation team. Many organizations here, they would have like innovation lab, But in my experience, some of them are really good. They succeed pretty well, but many of them fail too. What do you think separate the two, failure or success?
Well, I think obviously there are a lot of components for why things could fail. I mean, I won't claim to know the answer in every single case, but in terms of what I have seen and what I believe in terms of sustained success, really again comes down to, are you creating an ivory tower for a few people to innovate and then lead the company, or are you creating a culture of innovation where everybody now can be taught about here's how to innovate and empowered to innovate? And I feel the more sustained, successful model is, and the one obviously that I believe in, is the latter model.
Yes. And in your book, when we talk about design thinking, I feel like it's become a real buzzword in the industry. What do people misunderstand about design thinking?
Yeah, a lot of people, when they hear the term, they think, oh, design thinking, that's just for designers or for creative people. But really, it's an approach to problem solving that applies to all domains. At Intuit, we simplified it so that we could make it easy for everybody to understand. We called it Design for Delight. And it had these three components. One was deep customer empathy. So this is your attempt to know customers better than they know themselves.
Yes.
And for us, it meant we did things like Follow Me Home. So we would observe customers in their own environment. And, there's the saying, to walk in another person's shoes, you have to take off your own shoes. So this notion that we can be ethnographers and really understand our customers well. And then the next notion was go broad to go narrow. So this is the idea, when you're attempting to solve problems, don't just come up with the first idea and think, okay, let's go work on that. Actually come up with as many ideas as you can, because what you'll find out often is that the best idea was not the first idea. And in fact, the best idea sometimes is an amalgamation of many ideas that you came up with. The last aspect of Design for Delight is rapid experiments with customers. So this whole notion that, when you're building a solution, don't go into your lab and plan it and spend many months or years building something and then deliver it to customers. we find that actually is often a path to failure, that it's actually better to iterate, build something quickly, test it with customers, understand what's working, what's not working, course correct, do your next iteration, and then that's how you get to a great product.
Well, that is really, really great. And in your book, you do talk about open collaboration. I think collaboration is really key for success. Although in many organizations, even here in Silicon Valley, we tend to compete instead of collaborating for whatever reason. How do leaders encourage collaboration? And one thing a pushback I've heard about that, my own experience is people feel like it creates a lot of endless meetings, which they feel like it's just getting in the way. How would you encourage teams to collaborate more?
Yeah, again, when you get to large organizations, what inevitably happens is silos form.
Yeah.
And what I mean, you'll be surprised, just go into any large organization and you'll talk to a product person and say, have you ever talked to anyone in legal? Yes. And you'll find many have never. Or ask an engineer, have you ever met anybody from finance? And you'll find they've never have. So these form where we're not even talking to each other. And my observation is the most effective teams tend to be cross-functional because they have to bring their respective expertises to solve problems in a holistic way. And so, I've visited companies where it's always been interesting to me to observe when you have people now in a cross-functional environment where somebody would say, oh yes, we wanted to do this particular approach, but legal wouldn't allow it. And then there happens to be a lawyer from legal team. Oh, we never said that. They just sit back and watch the conversation. Yes. And that actually happens. These mythologies build up in companies where things cannot be done because supposedly somebody said they could not be done.
Wow.
And so when open collaboration, it's not as much the notion that have lots of meetings. It's just make it so that people are talking to each other. I'll give you another example. Somebody needs to procure some hardware for a project they're working on, and they fill out the document, they send it up, the procurement team rejects it because this part is missing, this part is missing. Then they try to make that fix. And so at the end of the day, 6 weeks has gone by and they're complaining the procurement team is difficult. Yes. Well, you go to the procurement team and says, I don't know why they didn't just come to me. We could have sat down together and done it, and would have worked the first time. It's literally that's what we're talking about with open collaboration. Once you can break the silos, you're going to work much more efficiently.
I really like that. And in your book, when you talk about lean experimentation, I think Silicon Valley is definitely the place where that happened with our agile methodology, which really blew my mind when I came here about 12, 13 years ago. I have this little my best commanding officer gave to me. Once I say success, and that's what people focus on, but on the other side, it says failure. And usually, in order to be successful, you have to go through a series of failure to eventually achieve success. So, and I know in Silicon Valley, generally speaking, failure is quite celebrated, but of course, failure isn't the goal. Nobody wants to start a business to fail, but it's learning, right? What are you learning from it? I think I even heard, and I can't remember exactly whom, maybe it was Steve Jobs, but one of the Silicon Valley gurus said, basically, you have to fail so many times before you succeed. So just go ahead and start your experimentation and fail as quickly as you can so you can get to the success as quickly as possible. Kind of a different way of thinking, but it makes sense to me now. How should leaders think differently about experimentation? I guess that's the question for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, there's the famous Thomas Edison quote where he said, I've not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. So it's absolutely about learning. In fact, I try to avoid the F word as much as possible and really talk about really the thing that we value, the currency that's important is learning. So when a team has run an experiment and the results are not what we were hoping for, it's not, a leader should not berate the team, but should ask them, what have you learned? Now, if the team cannot articulate what they've learned, then maybe berating the team is the appropriate thing to do. But ultimately, that learning is what's going to unlock the insights that will ultimately lead to success.
That is really insightful. We have about 5 minutes left, but I think I need to ask this question, especially for those who follow the show who are in cybersecurity like me. I remember I've been doing this for about 30 years now. Like about 25, 28 years ago, cybersecurity used to be known as the department of no. Anybody comes and wants to do something innovative, brand new, no, can do it. Too many risks. We just can't. But the truth is, if you are going to lead the cybersecurity function of an organization, your job is not to say no. Your job is to find a way to say yes. How can we reduce the risk? How can we do it in a safe and secure way? So I really love the part of the book I love the best is about align for yes. I think that's really, really important, right? I love this chapter because instead of asking, why won't this work? Then you turn it around. Leaders should ask, how can we make this work? Not why we can do it, but how we can. So I think that's especially that's part of the reason why I think every cybersecurity professional needs to become a business leader too. I mean, they're not required to get the MBA like I did, but I think it's important that you understand that your job is to really be aligned to the mission objective of a business, right? We are here to make things happen, and how can you do it in a more secure way and reduce risk? But anyway, so I guess the question I have for you is, where did that philosophy come from you and your co-author? How can we make this work instead of why this will not work at all?
Yeah, no, look, you've articulated this very well. I mean, imagine a scenario where an employee comes to you, let's say you run the data center, and they say, hey, we want to launch an environment that bypasses the firewall. You can then look at that person like they're crazy and say, no, hell no, go away, right? Yeah. But here's the problem. There was some business problem they were trying to solve. And by you saying hell no, they're right, at least at that moment, they're now going to be unable to solve that problem. And so the better conversation to have is to say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? Why do you need that? Start to engage in a conversation with the idea that I'm going to help you get there. Now, it may not be what you were just requesting, but it may be something different, but hopefully that different thing will get you to your objectives. And I credit you, you asked me where it came from. I credit Brad Smith, who was the CEO of Intuit at the time. And he actually said this. He said, no one should think their job is to say no.
Wow.
Right? Again, this is this notion that we're all innovators. We're all pushing forward in realizing the vision of what the business is trying to be. So if you're saying you're an obstacle rather than being part of the solution. So again, when somebody comes to ask you for help, you may not be able to give them exactly what they're asking for, but you should be able to help them achieve the objective they're trying to achieve.
Wow, that is really powerful. Of all of the chapters in the book, which one was the most challenging for you to write?
Which one is the most challenging? You know, I would say...
Or even one that surprised you. Because sometimes when you start writing, you think you have an idea how it's going to end, but then you start with your research, you learn something else and you get a different insight.
Yeah, look, here's what I would say is probably the chapter that creates the most angst for me, which is that we talk to lots of innovation leaders, so that we got to benefit when we were writing from the book. We got to benefit from experience from other companies, and what we saw is that once you've established an innovation of culture, culture of innovation. Once you've established that, you actually will come to a scenario where you have excess innovation. In other words, you're building products, ideas, solutions rather that clearly have some traction with customers, that there's some benefit. In some cases, like companies at Google, you may even have millions of customers using that product. So you could say it's successful. But then the next problem you run into is a company will say, look, but we can't have tens of thousands of products. We have to focus. And so, Apple, Steve Jobs, he is quite infamous for being very brutal in terms of focusing where Apple was going to put their resources. Google, same thing, have been, made some very difficult decisions. So I say it causes angst because if you're not thoughtful about it, it means that often you've built great products. Customers may, in many cases, love them, be depending on them, and then you decide to cancel them. And this doesn't quite sit right with me. And so what I wrote about is a solution where you actually have a plan for what to do with what I'm calling excess innovation. And this is allowing things to spin out, allowing other companies maybe to acquire or fund activities. But this is something which I'll admit Probably maybe IBM and Cisco are companies that have done it at some level, but in general, and at least in my research, it's not something that I've seen where there's a widespread adoption or understanding of.
That is really powerful. I guess the last question I'm going to ask about the book then is, if someone could only implement one idea from your book this week, which would create the greatest impact, you think?
Yeah, look, this is what I often tell people, like, how do we start? I would say to them, just start with a day or maybe even half a day where you tell employees, okay, we're going to pause from our daily work, and this is the time for you to just work on your own ideas. Just start with that.
Yes.
It's a small investment, but it'll give you at least a taste of what it looks like. And then you can decide after that day or half day whether it was worth it or whether you feel like you got good results. If you did, then you can maybe decide to do it again or to invest more in it. If it didn't work out, then you don't have to continue doing it. So treat it itself, the innovation, the culture of innovation journey, treat it as an experiment as well. But yeah, just start half day.
Okay, we've technically run out of time. Can you give me 5 more minutes before we end the show? Okay, I do want to ask you about Blacktown. I'll go say passion project for you. What inspired you to create Blacktown? And that's black-town.org.
Yes, thank you for asking the question. Hopefully most of you who are listening in have read the 1619 Project. This for me was one of the most important books that I've read. And of course, for those who don't know it, the 1619 was when the first Africans arrived on the North American continent. And basically the journey, the history of Africans on this continent from 1619 till now. So I'm not a history person, but I like to think that I am, somewhat informed. And yet, in reading this book, I was very surprised. I was quite shocked about how much I didn't know, and specifically, what was very illuminating to me was the time of Reconstruction. So the time right after the Civil War and before the so-called Jim Crow kicked in. But it was a time when emancipated people were building. They started with nothing, and they started to form communities. They started to, to grow food. They started businesses, and it was sort of a small period of positivity in our nation's history. And I feel like a lot of people just don't know enough about it. And for example, I think many people at this point know about Greenwood and the Tulsa massacre that happened. But people might think, oh, that Greenwood district, that was an exception. But actually it was not. There are many, many communities that were very successful. In fact, there are many communities that dubbed themselves the Black Wall Street. And it's just, again, their stories are not known. So that was really what drove me to say, let's create an archive where these stories can be shared.
Wow, that is really powerful. And I have a website here. So that, again, black-town.org for those who want to follow it. I think you're really doing a great service, I believe, to humanity. One thing in America, we don't really know our history very, very well, but people can go there and put in their community or ask a question, and it will work just like magic. So great resource. Thank you so much for making it available to the world and mentioning it on the Leadership and Success podcast. So as we end the show today, I wanted to end with what I like to call I'm going to ask you some questions. So lightning round, right? So I'm going to ask a question. I want you to just speak the first thing that comes to your mind, as we don't have much time. So one word or very, very short answer. Okay, first company. What is your favorite innovation company? I think you're going to say Intuit, Andrew.
Well, actually, I'm going to say Apple, only because they've had probably the biggest impact in my life in terms of the products I use.
Absolutely. He actually changed industry. It's really amazing when he did like Apple Music and all of that. He really changed it with Apple TV and, I mean, so many industries at once. It's just incredible. Okay, what is the biggest misconception about artificial intelligence?
Yeah, look, I made a video about where I say AI, I describe AI as a smart guesser, that AI does remarkably well in guessing correctly and guesses
Yes.
most of the time correctly, but inevitably it guesses wrong. So people have to understand that, AI can be a fantastic tool. I use it every day to make your work more productive, but you also have to understand its limitations.
Yes, and of course, people, I want to point you to blog.umolotsi.com. I think I did read your article yesterday. Okay, best career advice you've ever received.
Ask for help when you're stuck.
Okay, what is a morning routine that helps you set the day?
I would say exercise, even if it's just a few push-ups. It's a good way to get the blood going.
One daily habit you never skip?
As I mentioned, exercise is one.
Okay,
Yes, I do pray every day. It's another one.
very good. And one technology everyone should learn.
Look, we're in the time of AI. I think everybody should understand how it works. So again, not to
Yes.
necessarily just plug my own work, but I made some videos which are very simple to understand. They're not jargony. They are made for the average lay person because
Yes.
I just want people to understand what's going on underneath the hood. It's
Mhm.
because then that'll help you leverage that technology better.
Now, we always talk about success here. This is the Leadership and Success podcast, and you have so many accolades and achievement. But is there uh, a mistake, a leadership mistake that you have made? One of the biggest ones that you are willing to share with my audience, and what you learned from it.
I've made so many mistakes. I would say the common theme often is where I feel like my head got too big, and I thought I knew more than I did. So to me, it just always comes down to just to try and stay humble, try and
Yes.
always be getting feedback, consulting with your colleagues. I think that always
Powerful. Wow.
too much.
And outside of your own book, what is the one book you would recommend to my audience? What is one of your favorite books?
There are two books I'd like to mention. One is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
Mhm.
I think it's a great book in terms of leadership and how to
Yeah.
create a really good team culture. And then Good to Great by Jim Collins. He talks about level 5 leadership. So
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that as well.
Fantastic. And you did mention the 1619 when we were talking. Why should people read this book?
Look, I absolutely feel like we need to understand our history better to understand why we are where we are here today and where we need
Mhm.
to go as a people. I also think that once we understand that history, I think we all can collectively have a much higher self-esteem, especially when we understand all the
Yes.
accomplishments of the people, of our ancestors before us. But
Yes.
again, for me, this book is so important. It was very eye-opening.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not a history person, but I was so impressed by how much I learned that I didn't know before. And I just encourage everybody. This feels like hopefully
Powerful.
in the future will be mandatory for everybody
Yes.
goes through school.
And there is a Hulu limited docuseries about the book as well, which is not too bad with Nicole Anna Jones. What about Drive by Daniel Pink? Why should we read it?
Yeah, Drive again. I mentioned it dispels this myth about what gets people to work harder. And
Yes.
again, you can also think about it as a leadership book, but it's really telling you these are the things that you need to do to get people to be really passionate about what they do, what they bring to work.
Yes. And I believe this was from your LinkedIn. I believe it's a bookstore in South Africa. One of your friends, the lean startup, Eric Wise, wrote that book. Why should we read that one? It's
Yeah,
the
I posted this because his new book, Incorruptible, which is on that shelf, was on there, and I was impressed because the book I think had only been out a week or
wow.
two and was already in a bookstore in Pretoria. So
Incorruptible. You're correct.
yeah,
Yes.
Incorruptible is great because he's there talking about how companies can really truly stay aligned to their mission, because many times you
Wow.
see companies that start off very high-minded, but then over time seem to lose their way and everything is just about making money. The lean
Yeah.
startup, of course, is something we really love because that is what we put into practice at Intuit and Intuit
Mm.
Labs. It's something I still talk about and teach today. but it's basically how do you take these ideas, dime a dozen ideas, and then basically validate them very quickly and efficiently, so that you can get to the real valuable idea in the end.
Man, I am so grateful for your time today. This has been great. So as we close the show, one question I have to ask is, when someone reads the Intrapreneur's Journey 20 years from today, what do you hope they remember?
Look, we this notion of people doing the best work of their lives is so powerful to me, because when we were running our at Intuit Labs, we would run what we would call incubation weeks. Very frequently we would get this feedback that that's the most fun I've had at work, right? For me, that was very important. So if people can read this book and come back and say, yes, I feel so inspired, I'm now much more passionate about what I'm doing at work, I'm enjoying my work more, that to me would be a lovely outcome.
Wow. And for every C-level executive watching the show today, what is one idea from our conversation today you would like for them to remember?
Again, just remember that your employees have great ideas. So make sure you're talking to them, make sure their voices are being heard.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the final question, but before I do, is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't get a chance to ask? I know when we prepare the show, I give you a lot more questions than we have time for. I do it on purpose, but anything else you wanted to share before we go today?
Oh, no, you asked great questions and we covered a lot of ground. So thank you again. I appreciate the time we had today.
Thank you so much. Okay, this is my final question. So imagine we are having this conversation 20 years from today. You've built everything you hope to build. You have influenced millions of leaders. What legacy do you hope people say Hugh Molotsi left behind in 20 years?
Well, look, I hope I've inspired a few people who came after me, and even better, if I was able to help them open doors and overcome barriers.
Wow. Sir, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate that. And one question I'd like to ask as we end, one word that comes to mind about our time on this podcast today, one word or idea.
Invigorating.
Invigorating. Well, I am so grateful for your time, and thank you for letting us use an extra 10 minutes of your time. Really appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. All right, everybody. This was quite one for the book, and I believe I'm so grateful for the time spent with us. Grateful that he has reminded us that innovation isn't reserved for founders or for CEO or for a few superstars. Kind of like what I said, right? The Spanish team, they won the World Cup, and none of their players were superstar. They were just regular people. They had the system that worked, that allowed everybody on the team to rise up to the level of stardom. And I think that's really what's really important, at least from my point of view. So I think every employee has the potential to become an intrapreneur when leaders create the right environment. So your career from engineering to executive leadership, from corporate board to preserving history through Blockdown really demonstrates that leadership is ultimately about empowering people to solve meaningful problems, right? And I really want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. So again, the key takeaway for me, especially those who are in the military or in cybersecurity, in Silicon Valley or engineering, is that innovation is really a leadership capability, not just a technology one, right? Every employee can become an intrapreneur when given time, given trust, and given purpose. I think the culture, not strategy alone, is really the engine of sustained innovation. And great leaders, they remove barriers so great ideas can emerge from anybody in the team, right? It doesn't. Great idea don't respect rank. For example, in my own example, when I was the commanding officer for the Global Network Operations Security Center in Suffolk, Virginia, I had a problem I couldn't resolve. And then I went to my senior leadership team. They still couldn't resolve it. And then I went to all of my department head. It took about 2 months or so. We couldn't resolve it. So I brought it up to the entire command, and one junior enlisted person, an E5, very junior person, came up with an idea in 15 minutes. We were able to implement the idea, and the problem that their commanding officer couldn't solve for almost 90 days was solved just like that in a couple of days. So innovation doesn't respect rank at all. So really creating that culture where anybody and anyone can rise up to that level, I think, is quite necessary. So removing barrier to great ideas so that innovation can emerge across the organization. I think the best innovation, they create both business value, but also human impact. So Make sure to get a copy of the book. I want everybody to, that's available everywhere books are sold. And there is a link also in the description of the podcast, The Intrapreneur's Journey, Empowering Employees to Drive Growth. All right, this is it for today. And tomorrow I'm going to be back. I'm going to have a conversation with the one and only Coach Kimberly Cohn. We're going to be talking about stepping into greatness. Brand new release. She just released the book a couple of days ago. It's available on Amazon everywhere books are sold. We're going to be talking about leadership, faith, and the courage to begin. Like me, she's a Maxwell certified leadership coach. So I'm really looking forward to that. And again, I want to remind everybody, we have a new friend in the spotlight. I do this every week. And for this week, that's Admiral Mike Studman. We actually had a great conversation today and watched the podcast, I think episode 160. Okay, this is it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and see you tomorrow. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership and Success Podcast with your host, Coach BZ. If today's episode added value to your leadership journey, be sure to subscribe, share, and join us again for more wisdom nuggets on how to lead better and achieve greater success. Remember, leadership is the most critical skill of our time. The world will always need leaders to inspire others, drive innovation, and execute meaningful strategy. So why not count yourself among the bold leaders shaping the 21st century? Until next time, stay inspired, stay committed, and keep leading with excellence.